Let's start tonight, though, in Nigeria, where the arm of the Abu Dhabi-based telecom group Etisalat is yet to agree on a deal to restructure a $1.2 billion loan with local banks after it missed a payment on it. According to a report on Reuters last month, it was in talks with lenders to restructure the loan from end to end. Regulators had agreed with the local banks in March to pursue a default deal rather than a receivership for Etisalat Nigeria, so as not to deter investors and to avoid a wider debt crisis in the country as a whole. Let's dig deeper into the details of this story. Deji Badmus joins us now live from Lagos with a lot more information on this. Deji, just for background purposes, walk us through the exposure among the 13 banks that lent this $1.2 billion onto Etisalat. Do we know who among them is most exposed to this debt and who's least able to afford this kind of exposure?
Well, first thing to tell you, Rama, is that this loan actually dates back to about 4 years ago, long before Nigeria actually went into recession. And part of the reason why Etisalat says it has not been able to, repay this loan is because of the recession and then because of the forex crisis that the country was plunged into. And of course, the country is still battling that forex crisis. And now, in terms of banks that are exposed, we know there are 13 banks. But some of the big banks in this country are heavily exposed. I mean, first, of course, would be Guaranteed Trust Bank, which says Etisalat is owing it around $138 million. And then you have Access Bank as well. That's around $131. There's Zenith Bank. And then there's also Stanbic IBTC that says it has been owed $24 million. Now, it is these banks that are, heavily owed that are actually coming together to say, look, if Etisalat is not able to pay, then they would have to take over Etisalat. And of course, as you've said, the CBN and NCC had to intervene. And the talks are still, as we're finding out that now, that the talks are actually not going too smoothly, Rama. But at the very top of the banks that are being owed is Guaranteed Trust Bank, $134 million.
That's a ton of money either way, Deji. But as you mentioned, these talks have been going on for a very long time. What's the issue here? Why are these 13 banks at Etisalat able to agree on a way to restructure this $1.2 billion loan?
Well, they are not saying much. I mean, we're not getting much details from the talks. But what we understand the sticking point is that Etisalat actually wants a component of that loan to be restructured in Naira. I mean, they want to repay back this loan in Naira. And of course, as you know, part of the reasons Etisalat says has been finding it difficult to repay the loan is because of the devaluation we've had. Remember, we've had about 3 or 4 rounds of devaluation between 2013 when this loan was taken to this period. And then, the Naira has weakened substantially. So Etisalat, we understand, is asking that a component of the loan be repaid in Naira, but that the banks are insisting that they are not going to accept at all, that the loan has to be repaid in dollars. And what they are asking Etisalat to do is to basically, that's Etisalat Nigeria now, to ask their parent company in Abu Dhabi to actually step in and, recapitalize Etisalat so that the loan can be repaid. But we understand the parent company is not willing to do that. As a matter of fact, we understand the parent company is actually considering selling its stake. That's its 45% stake now in Etisalat in Nigeria, because it says, Etisalat Nigeria is not making so much in terms of revenue for it that, that what Etisalat makes for the parent company is just around 3.7% of its total revenue.
Indeed, of course, asking the banks to take payment in Naira would essentially amount to a haircut on the entire loan. But let's talk about the CBN. We mentioned their involvement briefly at the start, but are they involved in these restructuring talks on a day-to-day basis? And if not, why?
Well, it's difficult to tell if the CBN is actually involved in this restructuring talk now on a day-to-day basis. But what I would just say is that there's just no way that the CBN would not be involved in this restructuring talks. Don't forget, sometime in March this year, the CBN had to actually call the 13 banks and, of course, Etisalat. And, of course, the Nigerian Communications Commission was at that meeting where it was agreed that the issue of receivership should be put on hold and that you know, that both sides should try to strike a deal. So I would suppose that the CBN would be involved in the talks to restructure this loan. But how deeply involved the CBN is what is difficult to tell at the moment, because, I mean, let's face it, AMCON, for instance, is breathing down heavily on the necks of these banks to do something about, you know, their non-performing loans. And so it just would not make sense, too, for the CBN to go neck deep into this, you know, as to encourage maybe Etisalat to get a favorable, say, a favorable term now that might not be in the interest of this bank, so to speak.
Right. Let's talk about general commerce. It accounts for just about 6% of total sector debt, at least according to CBN data, by the end of last year. But if companies like Etisalat are suffering, what about the other big sectors like oil and gas, manufacturing? That's about 40% of the entire loan book. Are they also struggling with similar restructuring problems?
Well, in the past, we had there was a problem like that, but I would suppose those problems have actually been surmounted now, because we've not had any sensational case like that. If Etisalat now, I mean, we've not had any case at all involving any of the oil majors. What we do know is that in the past, when some of these oil companies had problems, it was just because of the price of oil. I mean, the price of oil, as you would know, at some point last year went down to as low as $27 per barrel. But we've since seen the price of oil pick up, and we've seen activities now pick up in the oil industry. So I would suppose that you know, that the oil majors now have been able to strike out some kind of deal now in terms of loan restructuring with the banks, because for now nothing is coming out from that side. I would want to believe that somehow they've been able to deal with this, but there's no question at all that the banks too are heavily exposed to the oil industry. Rama?
Indeed. And of course, next sector NPLs at about 14%, which is pretty high. Thank you for that. That's Deji Badmus, of course, live in Lagos.